I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to be hearing from both of them a little later. I would also like to just have a moment of silence. You know, we lost a hero in Nassau County, a fire department lieutenant, Michael Davidson of Floral Park, who left 4 young children behind. And it just is a reminder for all of us of the sacrifices that people in public service make every day. So if we can just have a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. I'm Madeline Singas. I'm the Nassau County District Attorney. It's such a pleasure for me to welcome you all here this morning to the inaugural meeting of our Nassau County School and Community Safety Task Force. We put this together quickly. All of you responded. I was so impressed with the response we got, and the showing that we have here is just demonstrating how important it is for all of us to meet, to share information, to make sure we do everything we can to keep our communities safe. As Nassau County's chief law enforcement official, of course, the safety of our schools is a top priority for me. But as a mother of 2 sophomores at Manhasset High School, it takes on greater meaning for me and more personal as a mom, as I'm sure it does for all of you as parents in this room. I know every single person in this room was shocked by what happened in Florida. And we were shocked by what happened in a small church in Texas. And we were shocked at the tragic loss of life at a country music concert in Las Vegas, at the Pulse nightclub, at another church in Charleston, South Carolina, at Sandy Hook, where basically babies were slaughtered, at a movie theater, at Virginia Tech, at so many other places. And we are blessed that these horrors have not happened here in Nassau County, but everyone here knows that it is possible that something like that can happen in Nassau. They can happen anywhere. They have happened everywhere. And in the aftermath of that kind of tragedy, there's an all too familiar process. Law enforcement investigates. Reporters scour social media for clues that were missed. And then we see photos from Instagram and Facebook. We hear from neighbors and classmates who thought that something just wasn't right, who had a feeling, who saw warning signs and didn't know what to do. The information that was siloed and was not shared. That's why I wanted to bring this task force together. I wanted it at a time when there's relative calm in Nassau County, at a time where we're not all acting under some kind of emergency threat, but to make sure that we share the information all of us receive, so that if something is heard at a school, then we'll know what to do with it at the DA's office, or the police commissioner will know how to handle it. We can break down those barriers so that no one will look back and say, you know what, there were signs here and we missed them. So that's why I think it's important that we're here, we're talking, we're going to act so that we're not Monday morning quarterbacking, God forbid something happens here in our county. And this is an all-star group, I have to say, from every corner of Nassau County, representing a panoply of institutions, agencies, and different perspectives. So again, you have my gratitude for being here, for agreeing to work on this task force. This is important work that we're going to be doing, and I look forward ultimately to the reports that will be issued from this task force. So I'm going to acknowledge all the members of the task force. Bear with me because there's a lot of us, and that's great. First, our county officials. Deputy County Executive for Public Safety, Tatum Fox. Thank you for being here, Tatum. Deputy County Executive Kyle Rose Louder. Police Commissioner Patrick Grider. County Attorney Jared Cashow. John Plakis, our Director of Probation. Omira Perez, Mental Health Coordinator for the Nassau County Department of Health Services. Law enforcement representation from every level. FBI Special Assistant Special Agent in Charge, George Kuzamis. Special Agent Gerald Handley from Homeland Security Investigations. State Police Major David Candelaria. Port Washington Police Commissioner James Salerno, who leads also our Municipal Police Chiefs Association. I'm also grateful that security officials with some of Nassau's largest organizations and health providers have agreed to join the task force, including James Romagnoli, Vice President of Corporate Security at Northwell Health, John Dembeck, Director of Life Safety at Catholic Health Services of Long Island, Jerry Holler, President of the Long Island Metropolitan Area College and University Security Consortium, Karen O'Callahan, Director of Public Safety at Hofstra. School administrators, counselors, teachers, parents, and students are represented on this task force. Dr. David Flatley, Superintendent of the Carl Place School District and President of the Nassau Council of School Superintendents. Tamaya Smith, a teacher in the Massapequa School District and board member of the New York State United Teachers. Dr. Kathleen Walsh, Superintendent of the Diocese of Rockville Center Department of Education. Lynn Petrovsky, Associate Director of the Nassau Region PTA. Ronald Ellerby, President of the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association. And we have broad representation of Nassau's diverse faith and cultural communities, each of whom will bring a unique and valuable perspective to our work. Dr. Isma Chowdhury, President of the Islamic Center of Long Island. Bishop Philip Elliott of the Antioch Baptist Church in Hempstead. Mindy Perlmutter, Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council. Malik Nadim Abid, Secretary General of the International Human Rights Commission. Sean Ross Collins from the LGBT Network. Mohinder Singh, Trustee of the Gur Gobind Sikh Center. To address privacy and legal concerns, we're fortunate to be joined by Susan Gottheimer, Director of the Nassau chapter of the ACLU, education law experts Christy Jacobson from Fraser and Feldman, Christopher Shishko from Gorsho and Gorsho, and communications consultant Robert Zimmerman of Zimmerman Edelson. The counseling community is represented by Jamie Bokenschutz, President of Nassau Alliance for Addiction Services, Ida Franco, Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Nassau County, and Sue Mahler, President of the Nassau Counselors Association. Whew. Okay, so again, I want to acknowledge and thank all of the people I just mentioned and so many other guests that we have here today from the FBI, from our local police departments, from our public and private schools, colleges and universities, faith leaders. I want to give a special shout out to the members of our Long Island Youth Safety Coalition, led by, of course, our omnipresent Assistant DA Renee Fichter, from my staff, and for the outstanding work that they've done keeping our kids safe over many, many years. We've assembled a truly outstanding group, and I know that we are all united in our commitment to doing everything we can to prevent these tragedies, to make sure that we are prepared for them, that we have the plans in place to respond as effectively as we can if our schools, churches, businesses, or public places fall victim to attack, and that we have the tools and resources to recover. The task force will be divided into several subcommittees that will explore the protocols in place at Nassau schools and colleges to share information regarding potential threats with law enforcement. It will assess the training and support needs of educators, religious leaders, and private security officials at public buildings, including churches and malls, to reduce the threat of a mass casualty event. The task force will develop recommendations and guidance to ensure that timely disclosures regarding individuals who may be a danger to themselves or others are made expeditiously to the appropriate parties. It will prepare a training curriculum for educators and mental health practitioners regarding the health and safety exceptions to FERPA and HIPAA and recommend new or corrective legislation. It will make sure that there's a blueprint for information, how people from the public or any other agency can report information, and we can make sure that that information gets to the appropriate people, so that, again, information is not siloed in separate agencies, but that there's a sharing of information so that we can act on that information. And as I mentioned, the task force will issue a report of its findings and proposals. I want to make sure that we're inclusive. I was at SUNY Farmingdale and on Saturday for the March of Our Lives, and like so many, I was inspired by really the clarity and eloquence and purpose of so many of our young adults who have been speaking out and demanding change in the aftermath of these tragedies. Students are going to play a significant role in our work. We'll be hearing from our two outstanding students a little later this morning. We've also established a website for the task force at nassauSafety.org, where anyone can send their comments and questions. Our schools need to be positive, safe places for kids to learn. So in our zeal to protect them, we must avoid hardening our schools to the point where they resemble prisons. That's why I've asked representatives from the New York Civil Liberties Union to serve on this task force to ensure that we work to balance crucial public safety needs with legitimate privacy interests. I've spoken with medical and mental health professionals as well as educators and administrators who tell us that they want to share information more openly with law enforcement, but they're afraid of violating HIPAA and FERPA, privacy laws that safeguard medical and educational records. So it's important for everyone in this room to understand those laws, the information they cover, and in what situations. Both HIPAA and FERPA provide important protections for sensitive information, but they have exceptions for public safety that allows for the disclosure of certain information to law enforcement. And this task force is going to work to ensure those paths of communication are clear, that this sensitive information is handled carefully when it is received, and that law enforcement agencies and medical providers do not silo important information that we need to credibly assess threats and keep our communities safe. Again, I think it's important that we discuss these issues in a calm way when we're not under the threat of some emergent situation so that we can provide the blueprint that we need if, God forbid, we're in a situation. We don't want to be figuring it out at that point, so we're going to figure it out now. We have mental health experts, school administrators, teachers, and lawyers on this task force. We're going to put together resources for educators and medical professionals to clarify HIPAA and FERPA and ensure that when they believe a student or patient poses a threat to themselves or others, that they know to report that to the appropriate authorities, that they can do so without fear of legal exposure, and if they have questions, we're going to make sure that they have access to legal guidance they need. We're also going to take a hard look at our local, state, and federal laws as they relate to school and community safety, and we'll recommend reforms to lawmakers. So again, I express my gratitude to all of you, everyone who has agreed to be on this task force, to our law enforcement partners at every level, and to all of our guests here today. This is important work. I'm grateful for your time and sacrifice to be here this morning and for the time that we'll take to come up with our recommendations. But again, let's do it now. Let's do it right, and let's make sure we protect our kids in our schools and our community and our public spaces. I'm going to introduce now Joyce Smith, our Deputy Executive District Attorney for Community Relations, and she's going to talk about the structure and work of the task force. Joyce recently joined our staff from the Queens County District Attorney's Office, where I began my career. She has a wealth of experience from her distinguished career on both the federal level and local level. She's had senior roles in New York City government, and she's going to be leading the day-to-day operations of the task force, and I know she's going to do an outstanding job. So, here's Joyce.
Good morning. Thank you for taking your time to come together this morning around this important issue. The district attorney is committed to bringing together your brilliant minds to solve a very complex, difficult problem. This issue is not a new one that we are visiting in our county or across the country. It is an issue that has crossed boundary lines of income, race, gender. No matter the school district or the area that the student finds him or herself situated in, it's a concern that they have brought to our attention by taking to the streets of our country. And the students that we brought here today to share their perspective with you will bring that rally cry into this area, into this conference center, so that we can be stirred up and committed to tell them through our action, through our commitment, and through our willingness to sacrifice our time and our convenience that we hear you and we're ready to work for you. The district attorney brought us together so that we can come up with solutions. And this inaugural meeting is designed to make sure that we first hear the best practices that are already in place. We have representatives from agencies, government agencies, as well as private law experts who will be able to educate us and empower us with the information that they've assembled. But it's important that when we leave here today, that we get to work. So the emails that I'll be sending out to each of you will hopefully go answered, and we'll be able to make sure that you will be brought together in subcommittees that will be designed around your areas of expertise and interest. The areas of expertise that the district attorney outlined and the concerns that we have seem to be focused on three major segments. The first is on the ground level, inside of our schools and inside of our communities and our houses of worship, that's focused on intervention and prevention. When we see something, we may be prepared to say something, but what are we saying and to whom? So the initial response needs to be targeted at that level. And secondly, we need to focus on the legislation that is in place and the issues and the hurdles that we may come across as a result of privacy laws and confidentiality concerns. We need to have both ends of the spectrum and both parts of that conversation brought together in this subcommittee of the task force to discuss those issues and to come up with realistic, practical recommendations that we can take forward. And then lastly, we need to coordinate the response among our law enforcers. We have many segments of the community that are going to be concerned in the event a tragedy like that we saw in Florida occurs. We need to make sure that we are prepared, and we do have best practices that our police and law enforcers are engaging in that you'll hear about today. They will come to educate all of us today, and then we'll sit down in these subcommittee meetings and discuss how we can enhance them, how we can coordinate them, and how we can make sure that our left hands know exactly what our right hands are doing. So in these subcommittees, which will be called together in a series of meetings over the next several months, we expect to have very concise, constructive conversations that will be designed to bring about final recommendations that will be submitted to the district attorney for her review. We are going to have a substantive report that is tangible, that is usable, that is relevant, and that will transcend Nassau County and be used hopefully by our sister counties in the rest of the state and beyond. I want to bring to your attention someone who is here today. Nicole Hamadou, if you would just stand up. Thank you. The district attorney has many programs in place throughout our community to address the concerns of our community as it relates to our young people. One of those programs, or several of those programs rather, are coordinated under Nicole's leadership. Choices and Consequences is on the ground in our high schools, teaching young people about the dangers of drinking and driving. Stop Then Send, which you will hopefully hear a presentation from Ann Donnelly from our office today, is designed to help young people understand the dangers of texting while driving. Our program, Social Host, is designed to help the adults around these young people understand the dangers or the issues related to allowing young people to engage in substance use and abuse in their homes and the legislation surrounding that. And the Not My Child program, all of these can be coordinated and presented to your community group, to your school, to your young people, if you have them assembled in an organization or otherwise, through Nicole. So her contact information and some brochures are available for you at our check-in table. You can speak with her for further details if you'd like. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this back over to the district attorney. Again, thank you all for your time and attention.
At this point, I'm going to introduce Andrew Goldman and Brooke Madeline and their seniors at Syosset High School, and Dr. David Flatley, who's the superintendent of the Carl Place School District and president of the Nassau County Council of School Superintendents. So thank you.
Good morning. Ms. Singas, law enforcement officials, school administrators, and teachers. First, we'd like to say thank you for inviting us to talk to you about why it is so critical that we attempt to solve the issue of gun violence in our country.
My name is Andrew Goldman.
And I'm Brooke Madeline, and we're seniors at Syosset High School.
After the events in Parkland earlier this year, we were energized to make meaningful change and stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in Florida.
Both Andrew and I led our school's walkout and memorial service on March 14th. Our entire school joined together to honor the lives of the 17 people we lost in Parkland and called our fellow students to action. We hope that through continued action, one day, we will be able to walk into our schools without the constant fear of whether or not we will return home that day. As we stand before you, you may think that we are just two average high school students that attend a public school, and we are. But so are the 14 students from Stoneman Douglas, the 13 students from Columbine, and the 20 students from Sandy Hook. In 2018, there have been on average more than one school shooting every week. The United States has always been known as a leading nation, but the only area we are known to lead in is in mass shootings. Now, we could talk for hours on end describing the statistics related to gun violence in our schools, but instead we are going to tell you from our hearts why we need change.
A source that many gun advocates use to propagate their beliefs is the Constitution, more specifically the Second Amendment. But we'd like to go back a couple of paragraphs to the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. And while we can all agree that our union is far from perfect, our country has failed us as young Americans.
It has failed to provide tranquility for the millions of students across our union who are afraid to go to school each and every day.
It has failed to defend those who have been slaughtered in their classrooms.
It has failed to provide justice for the victims of shootings through our inaction of implementing a solution.
We have failed to create a society free from oppressive restrictions imposed on our lives, as we are restricted from living a life devoid of anything but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Young Americans throughout the country are turning our thoughts and prayers into actions and change because all of you, as adults, have failed us. Many of us aren't even old enough to vote yet. But it is up to us to fight for our right to live. But to those on top, our lives don't seem to matter, so we have to take it into our own hands to promote action ourselves.
From talking to students not only at Syosset, but across the island and throughout the nation, we have learned that the vast majority of them have a firm belief, and are firm in this belief, that the issue of gun violence in our country must be solved through reforms related specifically to firearms themselves.
By saying this issue is anything but one of guns is the position of ignorance. And to those who say that guns don't kill people, but rather people kill people, it is imperative to remember that people kill people with guns. Within the next couple of years, millions of young Americans who are extremely passionate on this issue will become eligible to vote. So we suggest you don't stand idly by as we rise to action.
Brooke and I would like to leave you with a quote by our late great President John F. Kennedy. We don't do things because they're easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. I stand here with you today. We stand here with you today, saying that we, as young, proud citizens of these United States, are unwilling to postpone action any longer. Thank you for inviting us here today. We desperately need action to be taken soon, as the lives of millions of young Americans across our country depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know who wants to follow that. But this is what I mean. These kids are just, young adults are so fired up and so passionate and so correct that the adults around them have really failed them. And this is our opportunity to really play a supporting role to them as they carry their movement forward. But we can do what we have to do to make sure that we keep these kids safe. I'm going to I guess I'll have Dr. Flatley, do you want to speak now? And then we'll have the county executive.
You moved up in the world, Dave.
Thanks, Patty.
So good morning, County Exec Curran, District Attorney Singas, Commissioner Ryder, members of the task force, and guests. Those who know me know that I don't go off script very often, but I'm going to take that privilege this morning. In the fall, I start my 40th year as an educator on Long Island. And so it's unusual, thank you. It's unusual to be in a room this size and not have a former student in the room. And this morning is no exception, so I'm calling out Lieutenant Mark Stanishevsky of the Lake Success Police Department. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you this morning. And thanks for all you do, each and every person in this room, toward keeping us safe. We've all witnessed the tragedies, and we mourn with those who have suffered the loss of a son or a daughter. As a representative of 200,000 students in Nassau County, it's important that we get this work right. So I thank each member of the task force, all the leaders in our county, for your time and your thoughtful consideration. There is good news to share. School districts in Nassau County have long enjoyed an excellent relationship with the Nassau County Police Department. In recent months, that relationship has only grown stronger thanks to the leadership of people such as Commissioner Ryder, Chief Smith, and Chief McCarthy. The Nassau County DA's office, too, has been aggressive in prosecuting those who would do us harm or threaten to do so. In my personal interactions with Assistant District Attorney Dan Looney, for instance, I've noted professionalism and attention to detail combined with compassion and a personal approach to litigation. One need only follow the media to note that crimes against children in Nassau County are prosecuted with the full force of the DA's office. However, there's much work to do. We must work with our representatives in Albany to strengthen the penal code so that threats of violence are taken seriously by our judicial system. Those who threaten to do us harm must be held to account before words lead to violence. We must continue to organize the resources of law enforcement, as we are doing this morning, so that efforts of prevention and response are focused and coordinated, including agencies such as our village police, the state police, and the FBI. I'm happy that they're all here this morning. We must identify means by which mental health services might be marshaled and supported to assist our neighbors and friends who deal with the pain and isolation of mental illness and addiction. The number and quality of mental health beds, particularly for adolescents, must increase dramatically. Some changes are simpler. Every year, on multiple occasions, we open our school buildings to the general public without so much as locking doors or checking identification. We must rethink the use of our schools as polling places. Rules that make it difficult to hire retired law enforcement professionals as school security officers, those rules must be eliminated. Section 211 retirement waivers for these professionals should be automatic. Civil service titles must be created that are responsive to the needs of school districts. Many of us witnessed the benefits of the Smart Schools Bond Act, $2 billion used to increase our technologies in school districts. I call on Governor Cuomo and our legislators to institute a $2 billion Safe Schools Bond Act that would allow school districts all around the state to access funds earmarked for safety and security upgrades in all of our school buildings. Before our New York State budget is completed in Albany this week, I call upon those same leaders to include a 10% across-the-board increase in school aid for school safety expenditures. Schools can do more, and we will. Most school districts are quite adept at running safety drills for fire, lockout, lockdown, and relocation. This helps us be better at the what of school safety. But as Commissioner Ryder pointed out to me just last week, we're much less likely to discuss with faculty and staff and students the why of these drills. Our children and adults need to know why we do what we do, so that when situations and environments change, we will know how to react. I count on the people in this room and your expertise to help us with that. The identification of members of our school community who might do us harm is difficult. Getting them the help they need, even harder. Schools must work to develop better mental health systems. In fact, as of July, schools in New York State will be required to do a better job teaching about mental health, so that the stigma associated with this topic will be lessened and options for those who need help may be increased. So we can and will enforce our laws. We can and will harden our schools. We can and will respond faster and with greater effectiveness. We can and will put more proactive factors in place and protective factors as well. However, the most powerful tool we have in this effort toward keeping each other safe is happening right here and right now by developing these relationships. When we trust each other, when we communicate effectively, when we care for each other, we keep each other safe. So I thank you all for being here today and for your work every day in developing the trusting relationships that will continue to keep us safe. Thank you.
Okay, see, we already have so much food for thought, and it's not even 11. No, what is it? Not even 10 yet. Okay, so Dr. Flatley, thank you, and I think I speak for all of us. Thank you for your service and for doing the work that you do to keep our kids safe, and for your insights here today, and we look forward to your increased participation. And again, if anyone has any different ideas about how we're approaching this or other things we should look at, of course, we're all open to it. But this is exactly what I wanted, just a medium where we could share ideas and everyone can share their expertise so we could move expeditiously towards getting a blueprint to helping our children in our schools. Our next speaker is our county executive, Laura Curran. Laura is really, an incredible person. She cares so much about the county and so much about our children. She was a school board member, so ideas of school and children are very near and dear to her. After the Florida shooting, Laura and I were speaking, both as executives in this county, about what we can do and how we can do things better, and also as moms, and just looking at those kids in Parkland, listening to the families, just revisiting that tragedy from a human perspective, putting ourselves in that situation. And we said, we can't let this happen in Nassau County, and are we doing enough? I called Laura, I said, I want to put together this task force because I feel like people have information, but it's not getting to us, and we can't act on it because we don't know often what to do with it, what we can do with it. Our laws aren't strong enough. I need to get leaders together so we can make this happen. And she said, of course, I will give you all the resources you need. It's an important task force that will do real meaningful work that we need right now. We probably needed it 8 months ago, but she's a visionary, and she's someone who understands how important it is to keep communication open, to keep these relationships alive, and she does everything she can to make sure that our children are safe. So here's the county executive.
Thank you very much, Madeline. I'm so proud to we have two incredible law enforcement leaders here in Nassau County. Thank you very much for this initiative today, for the task force. And yes, Madeline called me right after the Parkland shooting and said, we've got to do something. That was not very long ago, and look, it's already happened. It's not just talk, it's action, and that is really admirable. Commissioner Ryder, very similar thing. Right after the Parkland shooting, he came to me with a plan for school safety resource program. And 10 days later, it was three quarters implemented. It's probably like 112% implemented now. I had a press conference to announce it. And so these are two leaders who aren't just talking. It's not just platitudes, it's action. And I have to say, I am so proud to be serving with these two incredible law enforcement leaders. We're very lucky in Nassau County. I'd like to give them both a round of applause. What I like about when I look around this room, I see that we're getting out of our silos. When Dr. Flatley was talking, again, how lucky are we to have such compassionate and thoughtful leaders in our schools like Dr. Flatley. We're getting out of our silos. It's not the law enforcement silo, the school silo. I see we have faith-based, we have community groups, we have law enforcement, obviously. And we're getting out of our silos, we're talking to each other, we're sharing information, and it's that sharing of information that will make us more responsive, that will save more lives, that will keep our children safe and keep our communities safe. I also have to point out we have two Deputy County Executives with us today. For Public Safety, Tatum Fox, raise your hand. Health and Human Services, Kyle Rose Louder, who is incredible, doing an incredible job. And there's a lot of cross-pollination going on within our administration, as I see going on within the county now, and it's such an important thing to do. Thank you again. Thank you all for taking time out of your very busy lives. We have our county attorney here as well. Nassau County's in the house. And I also have to say, I think we all draw inspiration from our young people. I think you are saying, and we are hearing, that now is the time for action. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. All right, now I'm going to call on our police commissioner, Patrick Ryder, to come and talk about the program that he instituted, as the county executive said, just days after the Parkland shooting. But Patty, I think most of you in this room know him. He is a person who acts. He is a person who gets things done. He knows the value of intelligence. He has use a lot of his resources in the police department towards intelligence gathering, which makes sense because we can then highlight problem areas and hotspots and direct our resources to them. He understands the power of information. So this is right up his alley. So I introduce the police commissioner.
So, on the morning of April 20th, 1999, most of you were staring at TV, watching the events of Columbine. I was in the recovery room at Northwell Hospital when my wife just gave birth to my 3 children. And that morning, I remember walking out of the recovery and watching these nurses staring at a TV and seeing what's happening at Columbine. And I looked and I said, what kind of world did I just bring my children into? But I also knew at that point, I had to have a higher level of security in my own personal life for my children to make sure that they are safe. And trust me, when I tell you Mrs. Goldberg at the Wantor School District did not want to see me coming through the door after the first couple of weeks of kindergarten, because I was one of those crazed parents, right? In May, I was asked to be the acting commissioner, and then this year by the county exec to be the commissioner. I now have a bigger responsibility for the 1.3 million people that live here, for those 200,000 students that attend those 56 school districts, and of course, for all of the people that travel in and out throughout our county, We have to keep them safe. We have to protect them. What I'm going to talk about today is about the public school system, and I am not excluding, of course, our Catholic school system, our yeshivas, our 6 or 7 colleges that are here, but I'm just going to use the numbers, and I'm doing that because I want you to get an idea or a sense of sometimes you got to bring the rhetoric down a little bit. There's 50 million kids that attend public schools in this country. Since Columbine, there's been 200 kids that have been shot and killed in our school system. Schools attend classes about 180 days a year. So the chance of your child being shot in a public school is 1 in 614 million. I can never tell that fact to somebody from Parkland. I can never tell that fact to somebody from Columbine. I can never tell that fact to somebody in Virginia Tech because we did not keep them safe. So when I speak for all of our schools, private, public, and when I speak for all of our people here in Nassau County. And my number one job is school security and safety. There's 56 school districts in the public school system. That's 450 buildings, and again, not including the yeshivas and our Catholic school system. I attended a school board meeting, and I'm not going to use the school to throw them under the bus, but I attended this school meeting, and here's what the woman said to me in the audience. She goes, so let me get this straight, Commissioner. You don't want to put a cop in front of every single school. Of course I do. I'd love to do that. It's not physically or fiscally possible to happen. It's just impossible. But there are ways that we can mitigate and make it safer for you. She says to me, I see the student that walks out in front of the school and watches for 3 straight days. And on the 3rd day, he notices that the school has an open campus from 11 to 2. And kids are coming and going. So that's the best time to attack the school. And I have the kid then puts his hoodie up and he pulls it tight and he starts to approach the school. And I told her, stop. Stop. That doesn't happen. 1/3 of the kids that do these shootings in schools come from within the school. They look like everybody that attends that school. And whether I had 2 cops there or 1 cop there, it won't matter. Because I'll have 2 dead cops there, plus what that guy is going to do when he gets inside the school. Because they won't see it coming either. So we have to learn how we can better prepare and mitigate those times. We currently respond to any emergency call in Nassau County within 3 to 5 minutes. Since Columbine, 75% of the shootings are over in 5 minutes. Most are done, 52% are done in 2 minutes. So you have a 2 to 5 minute window for the majority of our shootings, and I have a 3 to 5 minute window in response time. Sounds to me like I need to close the gap of that 60 seconds because time saves lives. That's how we're going to make a difference here. Whether that school chooses to go with an armed guard, extra security, or locking down procedure, that's going to be the choice of the school. But what we're going to do, and we have already instituted, we trained 160 principals in the last 2 weeks on active shooter. We're going to go into every single school, and we're going to do an assessment. And after we come back from that assessment, that school will enhance those security measures that we work together in trying to make better. I've been to Dr. Flatley's school. I walked in there the day to do a press conference, and I had to get a name tag. I said, you know who I am. It's the rules. You got to put the name tag on. And he asked me, are you carrying a gun? I said, well, you know who I am. I'm a cop. He goes, okay, I just need to know who's in my building. The point of what he was trying to get across to me, there's no difference from anybody, whether you're a teacher or a student or a parent coming into that school. You all have to follow the same rules, and that will come part of what we do during the assessment. We need to know, every cop in Nassau County is now mandated to do what we call a park, walk, and talk to a school every single day. I have 177 cops on the street. That means 177 of those cops will visit 1 building a day. If there's 450 schools, in a week I cover it. And now I'm into my yeshivas and into my Catholic school system and into our businesses where we're doing these assessments. When the cop gets into there, he meets somebody from the security side, the building side, or the superintendent. And then they walk the grounds with the superintendent. Every day, they'll walk the grounds of a building. because the more familiar they are, the better they will be in their response. If the security is better, we slow the bad guy down. If there's one point of entrance instead of multiple points of entrance, we slow the bad guy down. If that door is locked in the front, we slow the bad guy down. If I train, and I will, every superintendent, which we've already reached dozens of them, every principal, which I said over 160 already trained, every student on active shooter, and that's part of our visits, and then every parent, because the parents are the ones that bring the rhetoric up. We need to bring it down. We need to enhance our security, as you heard from our students here, what their concerns are, but at the same time, we need to make sure that when a parent responds, or they don't get on that chat and start blasting stuff around that's not confirmed. Our information is incorrect. We spend a lifetime vetting out our information to make sure it's correct. I met yesterday with the ACLU, and Susan came into my office about how we protect the rights of the students, of the schools, at the same time enhancing security and doing it correctly. And that's one of the things that we're going to do with our school resource program. They're also, after they finish that, I have to get there faster. How do I improve? By walking through those schools and knowing that environment, I can better enhance. When a school, and please God that day never comes, but when a school shooting does occur, my cops don't wait. It's not, you're not getting the SWAT guy in the tank. That's after the 5 minutes. You're not getting the hostage negotiators. That's after the 5 minutes. Within that first 5 minutes, you're getting the guys in the blue suits or whatever uniform they wear from that agency. And I work very closely with every single village police chief that's in this audience and is not here today, that we work hand in hand when I visit that school district that is in the village of Lake Success, in the village of Garden City, in the village of Old Westbury. We work with those to make sure that we know what we're doing when we get there. When that cop is more familiar with that area that he's going into, and he gets his team of 5, he goes. His job is to stop the threat. People don't like to hear that, but that's what we do in law enforcement. We go in, we stop the threat. If there's a child laying in the hallway screaming for help, I'm going to apologize now. I'm stepping over and I'm going. That's what they're trained to do, because it's about time. It's about time to get in there and stop the threat. When I stop the threat, the killings stop. We go back and we take care of those that need to be taken care of. So if that cop knows his environment, he knows where he goes. If I know who the security guy is when I get to that building, I'm going to ask him, what do you know? Now get out of the way. We're the experts. We're the ones that are going to come in and do it. But that security guy then will be handed off to the coordinator. And he will say, here's my camera room. We have connected to over 130 buildings of their cameras right now in the public school system. So we could turn the lights on and watch the video. But sometimes getting to that video is too late. I'm already in that 2 to 3 minute window that I got to close. So it's about response time and familiarization. One of the other things that we're doing is we pushed RAVE to all our public schools. The RAVE app that sits on these phones, there's 5 people chosen in the school to carry the app. They could turn around and hit the button that says active shooter. Normally when you call 911, it goes into the 911 system and you go into what's called the queue. And by law, it has to go in the order it's received. You can't bypass that order. Everybody has something that's more serious, but there's no way to tell which one it is while it's coming in. So what we've done with the RAVE, it bypasses the 911 system and goes to a separate terminal. When it gets to that separate terminal, immediately the supervisor's on there dispatching cops before the 911 call even came through. And when we're responding, we then go to our camera system. And if it's available in that school, we drop down and we turn on the lights on that building, and we can see what's going on. And those responding will get better intelligence. But, again, it's about that 2 to 3 minute window. The RAVE app gets us there faster. Familiarization with the building gets us through the building quicker. Knowing the point of contact, not the superintendent in Call Place that may have 8 buildings. I have that relationship. When I get to this building, who's the guy I'm speaking to or who's the woman I'm speaking to? Where's the keys? Where's the camera room? Where's the security side of it? We'll know all of that. We're going to continue to build on that intelligence that we, when we get in there, can respond better, quicker. This is all about saving lives. It's all about mitigating the time. Like I said, The SWAT guys, they come after 5 minutes. You know, you've seen some tactical vests, tactical helmets. They're in every single car in Nassau County. Tactical vests, tactical helmets are in every single medic ambulance that we drive in Nassau County. Long guns, they're in every special unit, and they're in every SWAT team, and they're in a BSO, a COPE, a CERT. They all have them, and they'll respond there quicker. But again, it's about getting through that door as fast as we can to stop it. Once we can stop that threat, we'll be able to move on and keep those safe. I have a PowerPoint. I'm just going to well, let me see if I can open this up. All right, now I'm testing my technology here. Here we go. Doesn't want to go. Okay, so I went through the school resource program, what it's all about, and I spoke to you about Columbine. There's our responses, but you heard it before about what can be discussed with us and what cannot. And the district attorney on that legislation side is what's legal and what's not legal is going to discuss that with you and how we can get that information. Thank you. So what I'm here to tell you is that you can communicate to me now. We've told this to all our schools that, look, I have several social media sites, right? And don't worry, I'm not President Trump. I'm not going to be tweeting in the middle of the night. I don't even know how to tweet, all right? But I have people that do it. We have set up social media between Twitter, Instagram, and of course our Facebook. You private message us. When that kid gets expelled from that school, and you're not allowed to tell me why, for whatever reason, well, I know that little Tara, when she gets home, can tell mommy, and mommy can get on and private instant message me, and I can get that information. Then I am the expert that can run it down and vet it out to make sure it's correct. Just last night, we had one in the school. Information came in. When the information came into the school, it was given to us in law enforcement. We vetted it out. We visited the house yesterday morning. Yesterday morning. We came out with a M14 with a bump stock and 3 handguns. One of the handguns was on the counter in a fishbowl, sitting there, a .380, when our cops went in. If we didn't have that information, does that kid now go to that school and cause that major issue for us? And the answer is we got it. The school communicates to us, which is important. We vet it out to make sure we're right, that we're not just going on crazy people putting crazy things on there. And then we went and did an interview. And from the interview, and working with our district attorney's office, we came and took those guns off the street. That's what's important. Preventive measures in place, preventive security, enhancement of getting there quicker is what's going to save lives. I'm not going to go down the road of armed security and not security. Every school should have security. Every school should have security. Every school should have doors that lock. And they don't. Because we're going through the assessments. They don't. Every school should know their layout and their floor plans. I can tell you this, Carl Place does, because we've been through that process with them. And we've walked the districts. And many other of the districts that are here today and we've already been there and done it. So what I ask all of you sometimes is that we need to bring it down just a little bit, but let the experts, the people that are sitting here, this task force that's going to put together this information, that's going to find a better way to make you secure and keep your kids safe, that they go to that school and don't have that concern. So I'll do my part. You do your part. Keep that pressure on your schools to make sure that they work with us. And again, almost all of them do. And we'll keep your kids safer. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is FBI Special Agent John Robinson, who will talk about active shooters and discuss FBI crisis management and response. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
I'm going to follow my PowerPoint. I'm not giving up on it. Okay, great. Good morning. I realize I'm a stranger to most of you. If you don't know me, my name is John Robinson. I'm the Crisis Management Coordinator for FBI New York. And I'm going to try to take a couple quick minutes. I know I'm probably separating you from coffee and a break to talk about active shooter, some of the trends we see, just to give you a little taste of some of the statistics of things we're following that are out there right now. Prevention versus prediction. So this is an analogy that comes from cardiology. If I'm a doctor, I might be able to look at your stats and your health and give you all the tips I know to keep you healthy to prevent a heart attack. But even with the best medicine, the best health, best fitness regimen, there's still no way that I can actively predict whether or not you will or will not have a heart attack. There are certain indicators, just like in active shooters, there are certain indicators, but there is no guarantee. Do not look for a singular profile. Okay, so a couple of things. This is not a presentation on what you should be doing at your schools, in your law enforcement department. The commissioner spoke to that, okay? We do have programs at the FBI, the run, hide, fight model that everyone's familiar with, and exercises. So I'm the crisis management coordinator for FBI New York. I spend the majority of my time planning tabletop exercises with state, local, JTTF to try to plan for the next crisis in the moment of peace. So when that moment happens, we're ready. And we do those with many of our counterparts, some of which are in this room. If you haven't seen it, the Bureau has a really good presentation out there on the coming storm. It's a free DVD the Bureau pushes out about active shooter response at a local level. Most of what I'm going to speak to today comes from these agencies. So we're going to talk about information that comes from a variety of LEOs and legal departments about what we've learned from active shooters. Our Behavioral Assessment Center, which is the people that collate most of this data, and then our Office of Partner Engagement, which pushes that information out to the field, is responsible for what I'm going to present to you today. Targeted violence, okay, so this is the term we use to encompass all targeted violence, of which active shooter is a part. Active shooter is a part of targeted violence, whether it's stalking. It's a term that came from a study from a 1998 study from the Secret Service and has been used ever since. So some of the events we've studied, none of these should be unfamiliar to everyone in this room. Our most recent event, Stoneman Douglas High School. I think everyone is familiar with what happened there about the shooter and the result. What we missed. So some of the red flags, the indicator behavior, the things that now when we're going through with a fine-tooth scalpel, we're finding multiple things that were missed. And I was talking to some of our law enforcement partners before. That bullet point in the bottom is the one that always bothers us. There was no criminal history, right? No prior act up until the moment that this happened. So how did it not come up on our radar? And yes, we missed it too. So one of the main studies we did back a few years back, Department of Education and Secret Service looked at 37 separate instances of targeted violence related to schools. Here were some of the key findings. Excuse me. So two other studies that I'm going to pull some data from: campus attacks, prevention, and of course workplace violence. Broken down into the following categories. Were I teaching civilians or a school, I would tell you the importance is to emphasize on a survival mindset. Survival mindset is what gets people through active shooter events. Every police officer goes through this every day when they go out on the job and they put on their badge and they put on their gun. Survival mindset is what gets people through these incidences. Some of the common risk factors and flags that came up from the studies. And then taking those studies and putting them into action like every law enforcement agency does here, active shooter drills. Taking what we've learned and responding, whether it's the first cop, security guard, whoever the first responder is, as the commissioner alluded to, and some of the stats to back it up. Important to note the survivability, again, survivor mindset. I spent a lot of time with our OpMed program. I can tell you active shooter survivability, if you look at the numbers, people can, will, and do survive active shooters. Working with your first responders, whether they're cops, firemen, law enforcement, and talking to them about walking into a mass casualty scene is key. and there's multiple presentations out there about what happens at a medical level when an active shooter happens, because it's not the ambulance going in and saving people when this happens. People save themselves. I don't think this comes as a surprise, but obviously the number of shootings is on the rise. I apologize, this is dated material. We're currently getting up-to-date material from our Office of Department Engagement, and we're expected to put out a new study next year, which will have our most current information. So, this is very deceptive. We start talking about looking at profiles of people, and you see that first statistic up top, and people start thinking, well, it must be a lone male, that lone wolf. And they might even say the age range of the person that might be there. I would offer you that you should ignore that. When you start looking at profiling, we tend to miss the targeting behavior that we know to be true and universal. Where these shootings take place, these acts of violence, and the history of it. You hear this term a lot, the Columbine effect. So what has happened since Columbine? Columbine was a very unique case study. Those of us in law enforcement, we know the officers who responded to Columbine did everything right, because they did exactly what they were trained to do. And since then, we have changed everything we've done in law enforcement responding to active shooters as a result of what happened at Columbine that day. So, given that I've given you some profiling stats, what does an active shooter look like? Who are they? Can they be women? Excuse me. So again, there is no singular profile. Don't look for a singular profile. It does not exist. There's no trend to indicate that there is one type of profile of a person who becomes an active shooter. What we do look for are pre-attack indicators, behavior. What we're trying to fight. You hear this routinely. It's the first response in the media when they interview the neighbors, the teacher, the friend. They just snapped. We're finding that is not true. Every time we look, most of these shooters are mission-oriented. It requires lengthy planning, fantasizing. The decision to act is a gradual process. It's something that is developed over time. There are many predatory behaviors, and they're observable to people that are familiar with the shooters. This concept is referred to as leakage. Things that we see afterwards that were leaked by the shooter that could be predictable behavior. Some of those behaviors. Don't look for a singular checklist. These are just common threads we've seen. So some of the pre-attack behaviors people refer to, this is something that our terrorism folks have taken from the jihadi world, the idea of cleansing and purifying, that final act before someone actually goes to commit that act of violence. Nowadays, with school shootings, the majority of it, social media. But cyber exploitation has to be part of your threat management team, monitoring, Twitter feed, social media. I'm not a social media person, but I understand that's where most people tend to put their ranting and ravings these days. But the pathway to certain behaviors are normally documented in cyber. So again, I alluded to this before, attackers tend to have leakage, which is basically a term used to describe where they announce their desire to commit violent acts, either through social media, artwork, school projects, conversations. They leak what they intend to do. Motives. So this comes from a landmark study where they looked at 30 mass murderers and found these common motives amongst them. And the commissioner alluded to this earlier, but who gets Who is the result of this violence? The subject affiliations? So, in most circumstances, it's someone who's close to the shooter as the victim. So, how do we combat this? The threat management model. We're still developing this. This is all part of our partner engagement. We're wanting to get out there and work with more people to do more threat management. It can't be a singular entity in law enforcement. It requires everyone that's in this room to work together. Using that model, prevention versus prosecution, we'd all rather prevent one of these incidents than respond to them. The good news I can tell you, every time I speak with law enforcement, every cop I know, every commissioner, every federal agent knows of at least one person, one story where they successfully stopped a violent act. Someone who was ready to act, and they can tell you one that happened recently. So the multidiscipline pronged approach, overlapping sectors of both law enforcement, security, human resources, legal, social services, mental health, all need to be part of this discussion. So, again, I know I'm a stranger to most of you. If you're not familiar with what crisis management does in the FBI world, I'm a hodgepodge of a lot of different specialty teams. We do a lot of special event work. Crisis management encompasses a lot of specialty tasks, operational medicine, evidence response, SWAT teams, dive teams. I'm out there to work routinely with other agencies to do exercises to plan for events. If you need something from the FBI, if you're looking for somebody, please take down my email and call me. I may not be the right person, but I will get you in touch with the right person.
I have to get these kids back to school. We said half a day for them only, so we got to move. Okay, our next speaker is an assistant DA, a deputy bureau chief in my office, Ann Donnelly. She does incredible work, lots of investigations, rackets, criminal enterprises. One part of her job is going out to schools and talking to parents and kids about social media and bullying. We have a program called Stop Then Send, which talks about making sure, just talking to kids about what they're putting out there, reminding them that when they put pictures out into the internet that they last forever. There's no pulling that back in. Once they hit send, it's there forever. And sometimes, kids are impulsive and they forget that, and they put a lot of things out there. They say a lot of things that have real implications. So we're there in schools very often, and we'll go to any schools that ask for us to talk about these issues. But social media now is taking on really enhanced relevance in this age of active shooters and kids putting all sorts of things on social media, and just that we know when we look back at some of these active shooters, they put their footprint out there on social media, and oftentimes we missed what they were putting out. So our kids often are in the best position to tell us what's going on, because if they're anything like my kids, they're on 24/7, 7 days a week, So Annie's going to do a brief presentation surrounding this, and I'm very fortunate to have Annie on staff. So, Ann Donnelly.
Thank you very much, DA Singas. As Madeline just told you, I'm a prosecutor in her office. I have been in the office for 28 years. And some of the scariest stuff I deal with in the last probably 10 years is the internet crime and internet challenges. So we put a program together, it's called Stop Then Send, that we give to schools and community groups about internet safety and internet awareness. And one thing that we've added to the program, besides talking about cyber stalking, cyber bullying, besides talking about kids keeping their personal information safe, is a whole section on school safety. Because as Madeline just said, our students are on the front line of what's going on. They see these media postings, the leakage that the FBI agent was talking about. Those postings are usually not seen by the parents or the teachers, but the students. So we want to encourage the students and give them a forum where they're comfortable in reporting these issues. And I know that's one thing the task force is going to speak to when you have small groups, about how to give the students this power. And it's important for us to make sure they have that power. And I'm going to use an example. The commissioner gave an example about yesterday getting a call, being able to go out and get some guns away from a student. We also had another situation 2 days ago where the commissioner of the police department came to us. They had gotten information from another student that a Snapchat had been put out where a young boy had a gun to his head. And we want the students to know no one's going to get in trouble for telling us that. We were able to send the police there. They were able to talk to the young man. It was not a real gun, thank goodness, but his parents became involved, and now he's getting the counseling that he needs. Those are the stories we want to be able to tell. Those are the stories, those are the kids we want to be able to help. And we can't do it unless we involve our students and let them know that we're here for them. So the last thing I want to say, I'm going to keep it short because I'm just here to tell you that we do have this program, is if there's any community events that you as police chiefs or community members are hosting where you want us to come and talk about these issues, we certainly will. And anyone who has schools that want us to come, contact the DA's office and we'll make arrangements. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Chris Shishko. He's an attorney at Guercio and Guercio, and he also chairs the Education Law section of the Nassau Bar Association. And Chris, thank you for being here. Chris is going to discuss some of our privacy concerns, because again, that's the real battle here, privacy versus public safety in this context. So thank you, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you to DA Singas and Commissioner Ryder, and to the county executive for inviting me. We work with Dr. Flatley. Our office represents his district, so it's good to see him here too. And it's good to see students. I was in high school when Columbine happened, and now I have kids of my own, so actually seeing the gap between the generations, it's good to see that something is being done about this. I was surprised when they said they wanted an attorney for the schools to speak, because I said, we're usually the ones who are in the way of all those communications and all of that trust and all of that work that is being talked about today. And that's because there are laws and there are policies, and every school district has their own, not only do they have their own policies and procedures, they have their own administration and boards. And while it is true that oftentimes people will say, well, the lawyers get in the way, the marching orders we always have from our boards of education and superintendents are, make it happen. Figure it out how to do it. And that's what we do. So when we get a call and we say something is happening or we want to do something, it's not how to say no, it's how do we go through your policies and your procedures and the law to say, what's the legal way this can be done? I thought it was very fitting that she was just talking about bullying and social media. School districts now have to investigate complaints of bullying. That is probably one of the most significant laws that's come out for school districts in the past few years. It places an obligation when students report things for the school to actually go beyond what used to be done of just, is it discipline worthy or not? When the man from the FBI was talking about signs and indicators, that is one of the first ways that a school can be aware of what's going on. It comes from the students. The student is saying those things. The student is doing that. At least once a week, I get a call from someone in the school saying, we need to deal with this issue. The student is saying something, and we're very concerned that it may be leading to something else. And what we do is we work with law enforcement, we work with the school officials to make sure that the laws that have been discussed here today are followed. I know that the word FERPA is thrown around a lot. That's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It is an important law, and we live in a time when data privacy and the idea of having any kind of your data being protected is almost gone, but that law still exists. And we still say, you have to adhere to that law, whether it changes in the future or not. Right now, it's an important aspect of what you do. And I thought it was interesting that Commissioner Ryder was saying 2 to 5 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes in the active shooter situation. That's clearly an emergency. There's no doubt that in that situation, sharing of confidential information would fall under an emergency exception. It's not as clear when we're talking to the police beforehand and they're saying, we're trying to prevent something from happening. How do we share information? Dr. Flatley talked about trust. To me, you can build trust by being upfront and saying, this is our interpretation of the law. This is the way this can be done. We will work with you, but we cannot go around the law. We can't circumvent it. And our obligation as lawyers is to our Board of Education, and superintendents know this very well. The board is not there every day. A Board of Education meets once, maybe twice a month. Their members may be more or less involved each day, but ultimately, they are the decision makers, and our obligation is, at the end of all this, to say, this is the law. Board, do you agree with this procedure that's going to be followed? And then that gives the superintendents really the marching orders they need to cooperate. So I was very happy to be asked to speak, because the more we communicate and the easier it is for a superintendent to pick up the phone and say, can you call someone at the DA's office and talk through this issue? Can we get this resolved without going to court, without fighting over these things? Is there a way to get this done? That is the most important thing, because otherwise everything will stop when someone says, well, I don't know if we can do that legally. And I think from the law enforcement perspective, it has to be done right as well. I'm sure anyone who's dealt with the DA's office says the worst investigation is one that was done wrong from the beginning. If you are not following the law from the outset, it's very, 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 very difficult to come back and bring yourself into line with the law. So early communication, and we say this to our superintendents, and they know it. Get us on the phone as quickly as you can. Don't wait until it's too late. Get us to be able to give our opinion and resolve it, and give our opinion so that you can know what you can do. And I think you were talking before about changes to the law. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is not updated very often, certainly has not been updated to reflect social media, the digital era that we're in. Those are very important topics that do need to be addressed with input from a group just like this. And just in closing, I've dealt with police in the schools in a variety of circumstances, everywhere from them coming to remove a disruptive visitor or a disruptive person to having to conduct investigations. And it has always been my experience that as long as we are upfront and disclose what's really going on, we've always been able to work it out, and I hope that continues well into the future. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. The legislation is really important, and looking at FERPA, I think, is really long overdue, and that's something that we'll tackle. We had a case in the DA's office that somebody threatened to Columbine a school if something happened. We brought charges. The charges were dismissed. We appealed. The appellate court said we couldn't bring those charges under the existing law because the threat was conditional, and because it wasn't ripe, so to speak, we couldn't bring that charge. So we could have brought it if that person had actually Columbined the school, but because it was this conditional threat and the conditions weren't met, we couldn't bring the charges. I mean, we brought them and then we had them dismissed. So we have been working actively to change those laws in the penal law, but of course, every one of our laws that govern this area in our schools is open for discussion and should be open for discussion. And I think groups like this will provide the impetus and sort of the pressure to make change happen, because those statutes have been on the books for a long time, and they're very relevant now, and we don't even have the tools that we need to prosecute when we know that someone's a problem. That person also had guns in his house, many of them. So not only was the threat made, there was the ability to carry out the threat, and yet we couldn't prosecute. So, those are some of the obstacles that we face every day. And this is why this task force, again, is so important, because we have to make sure that we cross all of these lines, that we, the silos are broken down, we share the information, all for the right reasons, so that we can keep our communities safe. So I think this is the end of our program. Joyce is going to come up and talk to us a little bit about what the next steps are. Again, I want to thank you all for your time this morning. I know time is so precious. And I thank you for your anticipated cooperation and really insight, because we need to hear from the experts in every area so that we can come up with a comprehensive report, as well as a blueprint. If someone gets information, what can they do with that information? Whether it's a faith leader, a community leader, a school principal, a teacher, a parent, a student, they hear something, they see something on social media, it shouldn't stop right there, because there is no plan moving forward. We're making that plan so that we can get the information, so that we're not one of these FBI statistics, that they won't look back on, God forbid, anything happening in Nassau County and saying, you know what, those guys missed all the signs. I don't want to be in that position. The county executive doesn't want to be in that position. The police commissioner doesn't want to be in that position. None of us want to be in that position. So again, thank you very much for your cooperation. I know you're all going to work very diligently and effectively, so we can put something out very quickly that will help our community. So Joyce, if you just tell us what the next steps are, and then I'm free to take some questions if there are any questions.
Thank you. So we have our marching orders, task force members. Now it's time for us to get to work. I'll be reaching out to each of you via email and by phone and smoke signal. I'll come to your offices to look for you.
Yeah, there's no hiding.
There's no hiding, because now the hard work begins. We will sit together. We will discuss over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. We'll have our first meeting of our subcommittees. You have all been called together to participate in the subcommittees. If you've gotten that email invitation, those of you who have come today to attend and observe and listen to the presentations are free to reach out to me or to our office so that we can share some of the contacts with you of the members and the presentations that were given to you today. But rest assured, within the next 2 to 3 weeks, you'll be hearing from me. And that first meeting is going to be the pivotal meeting when we begin to set the tone for our final recommendations that will be published in our task force report. So with that, if there are any questions for myself or the district attorney.
We don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive and make sure that we get people the assistance that they need. And part of it is also taking the stigma away. Sometimes parents themselves don't want to come forward and say, you know what, something's going on with my kid. I can't quite put my finger on it. I'm ill-equipped to deal with it. But they won't even come forward because they don't know what to do, and they don't know what repercussions that coming forward will mean for their child. So we want to take that away too. I can't do it. I'm not, I'm just a lawyer. I'm not equipped to deal with that. That's why I need to rely on all of you. So thank you for your comments, and thank you for serving on the committee. And it's just that. We want to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. It's hard for us to measure what didn't happen, right? Like, in a domestic violence context, if we give people services, I can't measure how many batterers didn't abuse their significant other. We can't say that people that we put into substance abuse treatment, how many people were saved because that person didn't get on the road driving drunk or driving impaired. We can't measure those negatives, and we won't be able to measure how many injuries or school shootings will prevent by creating this task force and getting people the services they need. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately we want to get people help. We want to make sure that information is shared, again, within the confines of the law. And if the law is lacking, if the law is tone deaf, then we have to do something about that. So these are the conversations, again, that I wanted to have today in a context of relative calm and peace, where all of us can use our expertise and put some, we can become the leaders on this issue. People are talking a lot, but no one's really doing anything, and that doesn't help our kids. I have kids at home who come home and say, well, what am I supposed to do if I see X, Y, and Z, or if something happens at school? Who am I supposed to go to? And I'm the DA, and I don't know what to tell them. So I don't want other parents to be in that situation. So I'm hopeful and really excited to see what comes out of this. And there's often cases that we can't bring. There's often situations that in law enforcement we're powerless to do anything. We're doing everything we can to create a better statute to address these issues. And what that statute looks like is something that is a work in progress. Again, I use that as an example to show sort of our frustration, the limits that are imposed on us, sometimes by laws that are just tone deaf, that are not up to speed with what's going on today. Social media, I mean, the fact that people have access to information 24/7 and put an image out and suddenly it's viral and everyone sees it, the last people to see it are usually law enforcement. There's a problem there, so we have to figure out how we can get access to information faster. And again, a task force like this, I'm sure we'll come up with a lot of answers, but we'll probably come up with a lot of questions too, and we'll figure out some places where we need to put some resources and close some loopholes. And I know these, I'm so grateful for the students at their voices and how clear they are and forceful and passionate. And, they're the ones who are watching, their classmates be gunned down in their schools. I mean, none of us had to deal with that in a school setting. School should be safe. A parent should be able to put their kid on the bus in the morning and say, you know what, thank God my kid's going to be okay until 3:30, then I'll pick it up from there. That's not happening, and that's a societal and really a moral failing. So let's do better. Let's do better for our community and for our kids. All right, thank you.